Hi, everyone. Welcome to a very special anniversary episode of Your Double Podcast. We have released over 50 episodes so far through the last year, and this is a very special episode. We have a group of people who have been fighting the abduction and alienation issue in Japan. This is going to be an in depth discussion between them on topics such as the experience a left behind parent goes through, how people can help, how politicians and global agencies can help, and so much more. I know what you're thinking, so who are the guests? But before we get to that, this is going to be a two-part episode. Some guests will appear in part one and some others in part two, as it's hard to get 6 high-profile individuals who are busy in their own life in a single call. The good news is that they all have been guests in our podcast before this. Now, who are the guests? We have the co-founders of FMP, Enrique and Deanielle with us. We also have Vincent Fichot, James Cook, Tomas Savickas, and Rachel Endo. All of them are left behind parents, and luckily for Rachel Endo, she has been reunited with her kids. You can listen to our previous episodes with them to know more about their stories. Now, without further ado, let's get into today's episode.
You can be just like me. You're double. All you have to do is ask to see your family. You have so much to see. You're double. When you learn about both cultures of your family tree. Bum, ba-dum, ba-dum, bum. We're double. Ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-da-bum, 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 bum, bum, bum.
Hi everyone. First of all, thank you for choosing to be here on a Saturday evening. I really appreciate it. People who listen to this podcast have listened to your abduction or alienation stories, and they know what happened with you and your spouse or your ex-spouse. In this anniversary episode, I would like to have a discussion about things we did not get to talk about in your individual episodes. Now, with that said, all of you here are also allowed to ask each other questions if you guys have any. Let me kick the discussion off with the very first question. What is something about abduction or alienation that most common people who have never gone through it, have no clue about? The answer can be something that they never realize, never understand, or will never experience. And in your situation, if you did experience it, how did you overcome it? How did you manage it when it comes to your situation?
Okay. One of the things that you find in this situation, I guess, is who your real friends are and who the real support system is and who are just kind of there in the background. Some of that's heartbreaking, and some of it you experience as a deep sense of betrayal. And there are, the real people in your life that care about you show up and stay there. The pretenders, the fakers, are the ones that don't want to mess with it. They fall away. And in my case, or my own experience, that was a lot of people that I thought were friends that bailed and faded in the background. And they all have their reasons. This is not the most comfortable topic, particularly if you're a parent. And most people, contemplate the circumstances that we are in. And for a moment, they feel sick and they want to throw up. And to help them get beyond that, they come up with things to tell themselves to get rid of that bile and that sickness in their stomach. Things like, oh, they'll come back, oh, it'll work out, blah, blah, blah. Whatever they need to do to tell themselves so they can stop freaking out. They try that on you. And as we all know, those are empty words. Those are not very helpful. And so that it's quite isolating. And many people say, particularly in groups like this, one of the things we do these things is because we want to have group. We want to not feel alone. But in this, you feel very alone. And the next bit of it is when you're separated from your children, no one can put in words what that does to you emotionally and mentally. And then others hearing that, you just can't put in words. It's no fault of anything other than this is something that's so visceral, something we feel so deep in our core that there are no words to do service to it, but we all understand that feeling when I talk about it. And so, people leave for that, but we've got the hardest thing is this alienation. I have one of my oldest sons. I have 2 sets of twins. My oldest boys now are both going to college in Boston, one at Boston College, the other one at Northeastern University. The one at Northeastern University, not long after they were taken, sent me an email, or not excuse me, email, sent me a letter, almost like written on index cards, like it was almost a ransom note, of an abducted, kidnapped person that looked like that, and says, "Dad, I miss you. I love you. Love, and love Evan." That's his name. It was within 2 years that through legal discovery, I saw a letter he wrote to the U.S. Embassy in Tokyo, begging them to beg me to stop trying to return them. And he said I was not his father, and he wished I was dead. So that level of alienation it's meant, first of all, we all know it's abuse. It's child abuse, just flat out, no equivocation, there's no way you can dismiss it. It is flat out child abuse to do that to a young, impressionable child. In his case, he was 12 and a half when that happened. Well, in this case, for 13 actually, at that point. But he left when he's 11 and a half. So that's just flat out mental abuse. I can't get either one of him or his older brother or his twin brother to talk to me at all, even though I helped them with getting my information so they can get into the university in the United States. They cut off only one of them would talk to me, and then afterwards said, "Thank you, but I have no interest in talking to you ever again." So that's heartbreaking. But how do I get through it? I have immersed myself in learning. I've immersed myself in improving myself and making myself more mentally strong. I try to stay as physically active as possible. I love cycling, riding my bicycles actually, depending which kind of route I want. And I just try to stay active, and I have turned my life into one of being of service to others. In terms of, I am not literally a teacher, but I try to be a teacher, a mentor, a sharer of information, trying to help other people be as successful in their lives as possible, just like I was to my children. As a way of contrast, my wife, being Japanese, and this, I'm going to say this objectively, not Japan bashing, but we all understand how they go about goading, cajoling, browbeating, shaming children into studying. I was the opposite of that to my children. They never had my love or my approval was conditional on anything they did other than being the best person they were. And I'm consistent with that with other people that I lead in my business, in work, and all of that. So that's what I do, and that keeps me going.
Yeah, I think what James did pretty much sums it up pretty good. In terms of, you find out who your friends are and family is, and yeah, I mean, after telling them 2 or 3 times, they get annoyed of you. They're like, "Okay, have we heard enough?" But so you have to find an outlet. So I'm glad you did cycling. I used to cycle, and my outlet was house remodeling. And then COVID-19 happened, and then I didn't have anywhere to go get things. And then I was like, okay, let's turn to tech. How can my daughter find me? So this is how I started Find My Parent. So Find My Parent is my outlet. And that's been my outlet for the last 1.5 years. And along the journey, I've met some wonderful people. And I'm really thankful that I've met some great people. And like I said earlier, I wish I didn't meet these people under these circumstances, but I'm also glad I did meet them. But yeah, I found this really dark side of not just Japan, but it's a global issue of parental abduction. Several countries have this issue, and it's just saddening that even though we're year 2021, and after the birth of Christ, and we're still having some of these basic issues that I would say that are in some countries, not all countries, in some countries, these basic issues where you would think of like the Stone Age time. But sure, maybe in the Stone Ages they didn't even have this issue, right? Maybe they had ways to solve this, but it's quite upsetting. Yeah, how children have no voice or no rights in some countries. And yeah, and here we are government's fighting for other things instead of addressing the very basics.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, first of all, there's the financial costs, which are much larger than I think people would expect. It goes beyond just legal fees, but it can be traveling to and from different countries. At the last minute, you might, be told you have a court hearing or a lead in a certain country and you need to travel to that country. This really means that a lot of parents end up going bankrupt. They have major financial problems. And sadly, doesn't always mean that they actually get their children back. So that's from a financial perspective. From an emotional or psychological perspective, it's also quite high, but quite hidden. So we do know, and we've read and heard about a number of parents who have children who've been abducted, who have unfortunately taken their own lives because they cannot handle the emotional toll it has on them. We've also heard about children who have taken their own lives because obviously children are highly vulnerable. They are not fully developed. So the emotional toll is even heavier on them. They often don't have people to talk to about the issue that they're facing. So, and I think finally, for a lot of left behind parents I speak to, what they tell me is that they almost feel kind of like they're grieving, they're dead inside. They have this child or children somewhere in the world. They often don't even know where they are. Even if they're domestic within Japan, like a Japanese mother will have no idea where her children are with the Japanese father. Zero idea. They could be anywhere. She has no idea whether they are well, they're sick, they're alive even. There's a lot of fear of how they're being treated by a potential stepmother, stepfather, stepbrothers and sisters. There's a high rate of child abuse in Japan and very hidden within the home. So, I mean, just imagine as a parent, as a human being, having to wake up every day, not know where your children are, how they are, if they're doing well in life, if they're being abused, even if they're alive. And that, I think, coupled with this idea that I need to fight, I need to do everything I can, will cause a lot of these parents to burn out emotionally.
For me, the coping mechanism has been from the beginning to fight back the system. So shortly after my children were abducted, so 3 years and 3 months ago, I figured that, and I learned at my own expense, that it'd be very difficult to get them back through the court process in Japan. So I hired a lawyer in France, Finel and Zimre, who at the time represented Carlos Ghosn. So they were well aware of the Japanese justice system, and we organized a class action against Japan. I filed a petition to the UN, to the EU as well. I've got a criminal case ongoing in France. And I started doing some press conferences and trying to lobby the medias and the parliament here in Japan. And that's how I coped with it. What I found out as well is that many people are very judgmental. Some parents cope differently, and no one should be able to judge them, because what we're going through is really devastating. And I've met parents who started drinking. Some of them started finding a very keen interest in young Japanese girls on campus. Some of them just gave up and left the country and decided to move on. And really, the message that I give to all these people who think are in a position to judge is that you don't know what we're going through. And that's, you're being taken for a fool every time you go to court in Japan, to the police. So it's very difficult that not only you have to fight a huge injustice, but also you have to deal with the fact that you're not seeing your children, and you have to incorporate the fact that you're never going to see them again, potentially. So, it's really a double whammy. And I'm really trying to fight back anyone judging anyone in our situations. For me, I think I was lucky enough to have very strong support from my family and friends, which gave me, the energy to fight back. and then on a personal level, I'm a bit concerned, when the time will come that, we've tried everything. So, when you've had your head of states talking to the Japanese head of states, you've taken the case to the EU, to the UN. I did a hunger strike. What else is there to be done? And I think this is when also, Find My Parents could actually help is to provide a caution for people who eventually realize that there's nothing else they can do. And I think that's when the shit really is going to hit the fan for some of us. And listen, and commenting on what James said, it's very sad to see his children growing up and being able to form their own opinion and not wanting to have a relationship with James. But I do think it's only temporary. I think it's very easy for a child to grow in Japan and to think that having been abducted, and I don't even regard it as being abducted, is normal. But as soon as you move to a normal country, you will realize that you have actually indeed been the victim of a crime, and that there is another side to the story. And I say that not to make James or anyone else feel better. It's what I've experienced during the hunger strike when I had a guy who was abducted by his Japanese mom, of course, Japanese father, and then he grew up in Australia for some unknown reason, and he was abducted at the age of 5, and he lived in Australia up until 25, so he was very Western-minded. But then he came back to Japan, and he fell back into the Japanese culture. And on during the second week of the hunger strike, he came to me and he wanted to say thank you. And I said, why? He was like, well, he told me his story. He was like, I was abducted. But it's just after reading about the hunger strike and seeing you fighting that I realized that I had been abducted. He was like, for him, up until that point, he felt like it was just a normal thing because no one told him otherwise. And eventually, on the last day of the hunger strike, he came to me to inform me that he had found his dad, and now he didn't know how to approach him, whether it was going to be over the phone or an in-person visit. So this guy is called Zuma, or Yuma. He's the last video that we made during the hunger strike. But it really shows that this is not right. And I've had a similar case with a French Japanese kid who was abducted from the States at the age of 8. And his mom passed away 4 years after she abducted him. So he grew up basically without a mom and dad, although his dad really wanted to connect with him. And he reconnected with his dad on Facebook 2 years ago at the age of 18. They haven't been able to meet physically because of COVID, and his dad is still living in the States, French dad. And he told me after the hunger strike, he reached out, he wanted to meet, and he said, look, I never felt like I was kidnapped. My dad told me I had been kidnapped after we reconnected 10 years later, but I didn't believe it. But now with all the press and your action, I really feel like I have been kidnapped. So it's tough to wait, but I do think that as soon as our children, and what we've got going on for us is that our children are half, so they will never be fully Japanese, and I will always be that curious, and there's a high chance that they move overseas eventually, and I think with time they will realize what they've gone through. So the part of the fight is to also educate these children, to make them realize that what they've gone through is not
100% on that. And I think that's our job as a parent, to bombard the entire internet for these children to look up information. It's like, oh, I was also kidnapped. And hopefully our children start speaking up and saying, like, this is not right. We've been robbed half of our identity, half of a culture. I mean, you're French, right? So your children are being robbed of their French side. Tom is Lithuanian. She's being robbed half of that identity, right? Same with James, half American, right? So it's, yeah.
Well, and if I can interject a couple of things based on what Vincent said, is first in my situation, one of the details that I didn't do in my whole monologue that adds to it is that about a year and a half, just over a year after my kids were taken, my father, from whom I'm estranged, found out, and he's been sending money to my ex-wife. So my father has been having access to all 4 of my children. He's very wealthy. And been basically paying my ex-wife, and she was more than happy over the years, as I said in my thing, to sell access. And so now he and I used to have a company together, and he decided to throw me out of it for whatever fucking reason he invented. That he's now told my kids, which is bullshit, because I've seen in documents what he told them, and it's just utter fantasy. But anyhow, he has now put in place, because I can see on the internet, he's put in place a manager of our company, and I've heard through the grapevine he's actually moved out to Boston to live and shepherd over my 2 sons out there, quote unquote, protect them from me, and to have quote unquote family around them. And so my son's ability to freely form thoughts is being controlled by this manipulative fucker who I grew up with. I know how he does stuff. I mean, I read him like a book. Okay. I have no defense against him. He's got money. He's got access. He's one of the best narcissists I've ever met. So he plays victim like nobody ever can. But so my hope for my older sons is not that great, because they're under his thumb. I have attempted to contact my children or parents to the school through Facebook groups. And every time I'm in a Facebook group, I get thrown out of it for saying nothing. I just get thrown out of it. And I think it's because someone's crawling in there, seeing me, or they go and creep on my Facebook page and see the ordeal I've been through. And it's just too messy for these parents to deal with. And so they throw me out of these groups. And so that's even more complicating and more heartbreaking for this in terms of support. But that's not make it about me, but that's a complicating factor in my case. And I have quote unquote email addresses for my younger children in Japan who have never ever replied to me, and I can't even get the Japanese court to verify that they're actual email addresses to my children and not to some other party that, like, her batshit crazy attorney. So there's my bashing in Japan. But that is frustrating that we can't even get any authority. Like Jesus Christ, the U.S. government step in on these, and they won't. That's been heartbreaking. And so I understand what you said, Vincent, and that is I don't try to even think about it. What happens if I come to the day I conclude that basically all is lost? Am I lost at that point? Because I can tell you there are days that I'm like, I fucking had it. To be straight up and tell you that I'm done. I mean, done with everything, done with life. I'd rather give up my life than give up on my kids. That's where my mindset is. And so I hope I never reach that day. But
yeah, but when you give up on your life, you give up on your kids. So that's not even something to consider.
I understand that. But you can also appreciate some days the pain is so great that you don't have the most altruistic, clear thinking too.
Well, for my part, what was the most sad, I have a big extended family, and it was quite shocking how little support I've got, and how quickly my family got sick of all these issues with a taken child. And the second part, which was even more appalling, was that the indifference of especially my government, Lithuanian government, was so huge. It was on the proportions I never thought it's even possible to have. Whenever I turned for help, I was always shunned away with a simple thing like, "Oh no, Japan, it can happen. What are you talking? Japan is Japan is developed country. We don't steal children. No, there must be something somewhere." They will look for about a million reasons how to justify this crime and call it not a crime but a walk in the park. So this was very hard. And then when I started to go through the lawyers, the Japanese lawyers especially, this was like the biggest waste of time ever. And the biggest waste of time, and the most deceitful of times when the lawyer simply knows from the get-go that you're already lost, no way for you to win. Everything is being and dusted for you the day the child or children were taken, and yet the lawyer will come with all kind of fantasies. Man, we're gonna open a case for A, we're gonna open a case for access, we're gonna open the case for change of custody, we're gonna open the case for this, for that. We're gonna open case after case, and we're gonna drown the other side in lawsuits. What he does not say, the most crucial of fact, is that when you go to Japanese court, it's like a circus. It's an absolute and utter circus. The only thing you're missing in there, you're missing monkeys and tickets being sold for access to that circus. The rest of that, all the elements of a circus are present. And this is like really, really disgusting how this abduction became so widespread in Japan that we don't even see it as abduction. Even Japanese themselves, which is also less than amusing, so to say, even Japanese themselves who have been affected by these abductions, they will not call it abduction. They will call it like, oh, the child was taken from home, and they will speak about it like they will use the language that the child will be returned at some point. No, the child will not be returned, because mostly when the child is taken, it's taken for good. And then when it comes to even as little support as you might get in the beginning or between the years you're going through this heartbreaking part in life, people will say, oh, don't worry, the child is getting older, he or she will find you, they will look for you, they will come back, don't worry, like this, like that. But what I've seen time and time again, sadly, too often the child will not come back, or if the child will come back, the child will be broken. Number one, the child will come back in an adult form. So yes, he will always be your child, but it will not be the child like you would have a 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever years old. It will be an adult. So the thinking, the understanding, it will be all different. And then it will come to the point like it happened, like James just mentioned. Yeah, the child might come back even to his own country. Now, no need to worry about orders and whatnot. The children are back in US, 2 children, but yet they're so estranged from him that even they're kind of close, they couldn't be farther away. So that is what people need to really understand when they say that, yeah, but the child, don't worry, the child will come back. The child will come back, maybe, hopefully, but it will never be the child like it's supposed to be.
Okay. Okay, well, that's really difficult to answer because I'm sure everyone has the same difficulty answering it, because it's the kind of abuse that we and the children go through. It's so insidious and it's so low key that it doesn't seem in itself like abuse or painful. For me, a lot of it is like just the gaslighting, people just not understanding that, everything, there's in everyone's minds, they have in their minds a way, things should be. And, like a societal expectation of things. And because of those expectations, I can't usually meet my kids' needs a lot of the time. And see, I'm having a terrible time even explaining it, but I try to explain it. Maybe one of the things is, like, for example, when I was going through the divorce, I was told I can't tell the kids certain things, like how I knew the kids were going to go to Japan and not come back. For example, I couldn't tell them that because the court orders would have said they're coming back. So I couldn't warn them, and I couldn't say things that would lead them to believe they wouldn't come back when I knew what was going to happen. And if I did say it, it's like I was abusing them. And if I told them things like, don't listen to Papa, because if he would say something that was like, mommy's crazy, or mommy's horrible, or, mommy doesn't love you, right? If he would say those things to them, then, and I find out somehow, and I say to the kids, don't listen to him, okay? Then it looks like I'm abusing the kids in itself, of me just saying, don't listen to Papa. And like when I got them back, and I ended up in a homeless shelter, and I would lie to the kids saying, it's going to be okay soon. We're going to get things sorted soon. And I would talk to the therapist at the homeless shelter. She'd be like, well, why are you lying to the kids? Why don't you tell them things aren't going to get better soon? So it's really frustrating for me to figure out how to fix these brainwashing things that are put in my kids' head and put them back on, their normal age level track of what they should be thinking or hearing or knowing. And, that doesn't seem like so horrible, I guess, especially in comparison with the parents that don't even get their kids back, because it's probably a million times worse, the kind of brainwashing they go through. But on top of that, because I got the kids back, I'm supposed to be eternally grateful, which I am. But I mean, I'm not grateful with the baggage that came along with it, and then the baggage that I can't fix, or I don't have the tools to fix. Or even if I do tell the kids, don't think this way, or I try to, set the record straight with some things that they were told, then I'm talking about adult subjects, right? Like when they were kidnapped and my ex-husband told them that I beat up a teacher when I came to the school to see them, which I didn't. I came to the school and I tried to walk in, and I kept walking in towards the inside of the school, and a teacher blocked me, and I just kept walking. So it's like I was pushing him, I guess. They were trying to make it, I was like pushing him because I was pushing my way in. And I never laid my hands on him, but, like my shoulder was, putting pressure against his body because he was blocking me. And the story they were told is I hit a teacher, right? And so when I try to tell the kids what really happened, I didn't hit the teacher or whatever. But when I tell them the truth, then I'm going back into, a subject that I shouldn't be talking about because it's an adult subject and there was lies involved and they were lied to and things like that. So I have this problem often. And again, the kids have certain ideas or expectations of me because their father told them certain things. And I can't meet, I can't meet what's expected of me from the children and from other parents that don't experience what I experience. And if I start to talk about these subjects and other parents overhear it, then I sound like a terrible person or a terrible mother because I'm talking about these very adult, sensitive subjects, and it's hard for me to know what is okay to talk about with them or not with them. So it's I mean, each little incident is not a big deal, but just, dealing with the gaslighting from, every direction, all day, every day, like even, being poor as I am. I mean, I'm, bankrupt and in homeless shelter, and I'm constantly, by society in America, I deserve to suffer just simply because I'm poor in their minds, so I already have that. Like whenever I encounter anybody along this journey, I already first have to start with that barrier everywhere I go. So it's just this constant gaslighting and judging by society. I'm sure like the dads have a similar thing where, just because they can't be around their kids, they immediately assume dads are a deadbeat dad. Even they just ignore the fact that they're trying to be in their kids' lives. It doesn't matter to them. They think, well, you're not in your kid's life, so therefore you must be a deadbeat dad, is I'm sure a similar thing all the dads are facing. And there's no way to argue your way out of it. There's no way to explain it because no one can understand. If it happened like once or twice, but all day, every day, it just
I have a
eats at
question
you,
here, Rachel, for you. It's a
you
two-part
know?
question, which I wrote down here. The first is like I guess the most important question is
Okay.
the kids. You went several months without seeing them, talking to them. Did they ask you why? That's question number one. And number two is the judge who you warned about Japan being the black hole of child abduction globally is like, did he ever apologize, or did he see what transpired? Did he do anything on his behalf to help you? Has he reached out in any shape or form? Anything from that courthouse?
For your first question, I knew what the kids must be thinking. It's easy to assume that, what he was already telling them. And when I first saw them, they did not ask. They did not, they didn't ask. And I expected that much. I expected them to be afraid of me, and they were, but they didn't really show it at first. I was going to ask, I haven't done it yet, but I was going to ask if you wanted my kids to jump on, and I was going to tell them that they would like to see if they wanted to talk, and that might be a good question for them actually. But they told me later that he had told them that I didn't want to be in Japan. I didn't want to see them. I didn't love them. They did ask in the beginning to call me, and he would snap back saying, don't ask about that anymore. After probably 7 months of that, I mean, I'm sure they stopped asking after maybe a month of that or something, and then they just assumed he was telling the truth because I wasn't there. And when I did see them, they were kind of quiet and didn't know what to expect. And it took like a month before they started to open up about some of their experiences they had. The other question about the judge. So it was a woman judge actually, and I kind of pieced together afterwards what was probably in her head was that I was alienating him when I was trying to protect the kids because I was trying to block the visits. Not the visits completely, but the visit to Japan. And it looked like, and when I read what he had submitted and things like that, I realized after the fact that those were things that sound like I was alienating the kids against him. Because in the beginning, I thought he was just making crazy talk. Like some of his papers said that the kids were whispering when mom came around. And I was like, what? Kids whisper all the time. Why does that matter? But I realized that later that could be a sign that the kids were alienated. And I knew after the fact, my ex-husband had researched parental alienation and made sure he knew what wording to put in all of his motions. So he made sure to say that the kids got quiet when mom entered the room, and then they started whispering and they were afraid to come near me or things like that. So he was very cunning and clever and did his research beforehand and convinced the judge way before I even had a chance to talk that I was the narcissistic one or the abusive one. Now she, like I said, she already decided in her mind, which party was the problem. So every time I tried to fight their visit, I got shot down. And the day they left, I came in front of a different judge because I put in an emergency motion. I came in front of a different judge, and I begged that judge to get a custody evaluation done before they left. And he said no, but he would meet the children for me to just to evaluate them or check them to see if he seemed like they were being abused. And he met them and he said they were fine and they should go. And was not the same judge that did our custody trial and did the custody ruling and had the kids go to Japan. The second judge, the male judge, Judge Jordan, he wanted to back up because, judges, they want to back up other judges' judgments, right? So he didn't want to overturn what she said. So he went with what she said and sent the kids. And when on that day, I remember saying on the record, I said to the judge, I said, I want it on the record that I told you that if they leave today, they're not coming back. And he said, okay. And then 6 weeks later, I was in front of that same male judge, and his clerk was crying because she remembered the story. She remembered me. She remembered my kids. And the judge, after we did the hearing where he ordered the children to come back, he went off the record. So he turned the speakers off and he said he apologized to me. So he did say he was sorry. But the original judge, the woman judge who did the ruling to send them, I never saw her again. I never spoke to her again. She never apologized. She never showed her face to me.
Yeah, that wasn't up to her. So he did apologize, though. The guy who did allow the children to go.
Yeah,
though.
but he wasn't the one that made the original judgment. And he did apologize to my face, and he did it a second time. He apologized 2 times to me in person, but off the record, because a judge can never apologize on the record.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious, is there anything within the law that he advised that the United States can do? Anything, like, listen, like if I'm the judge, like, listen, I fucked up, man. Like, this is, is there any legal advice he gave you?
No, there's nothing he did tell me, so there was like 2 or 3 hearings we had where my ex was in contempt of not bringing the kids back. And I think on the second one, he did say that he tried to talk to contacts, but the State Department told him he can't get involved, that he's not allowed to get involved, that I have to go through proper channels, and I have to go through The Hague, and they tried to give me a Hague lawyer, but my ex had already consulted all the Hague lawyers in my area. So my state couldn't give me a free Hague lawyer because of conflict of interest at that point. So he'd already planned this out before he left, obviously.
Yeah, and in my case, literally,
Yep.
literally and figuratively, the word case, I was also directed towards the State Department, and even beyond, there's a warrant for my ex-wife's arrest for contempt of court, and the Minnesota statute, according to my attorney, who was a liaison for the Minnesota Bar Association on behalf of the Family Matters to the Minnesota legislature. She says your wife's picture should be in the statute because she so perfectly fits what she just did. I cannot get the local Hennepin County attorney to charge her with a statute that was literally fucking written with her name in mind. I can't get them to do it. First it was George Floyd. Another is there's other reasons. Let's say whispers, no one will go on record, but basically, I can't get my senator Amy Klobuchar to help, and it's all sort of the same sort of cabal. In that is the original judge my local judge who got overturned was very politically connected, and his overturning by the subsequent judge, since he stepped off the bench, was such a public "fuck you, you're an idiot" kind of ruling, that he has poisoned the well for me politically. And also, I also know that my dad contributes heavily to political organizations, so I don't doubt that he has also contacted the senator's office. So, but they all did direct me to the State Department, which we all know is useless, absolutely, utterly useless. And if we at some point, if we can get our stuff together in a group, I would love to devote resources and time to shining a very bright light on the futility, and if it's even such a proper word, malpractice of the U.S. State Department for the public to see. And in particular with the very calculated juxtaposition of crying children torn away from their parents, and putting a bright light on the State Department to act on our behalf. But,
the State Department, I think, is clearly failing all Americans, at least in towards Japan, right? So
Actually, guys, before I drop out of the call, I just wanted to highlight. I think we know that Japan will never change. We know that we'll never win a battle in a Japanese court. What we can, and we know that our countries, all of them, will do fuck all to bring our children home. So I think, to me, the only thing we can do is to twist our country's arms to act. And I think, Chris Smith's statement like 2 weeks ago, stating that he was going to pass a law or enact a bill to compel the U.S. government to use the Goldman Act, I think is probably the only avenue. And I think this is where our efforts, should be focused on. I'm working with a French senator to replicate the Goldman Act, to have a French version and potentially a European one of the Goldman Act, while correcting its weaknesses, namely not only to look at international but also national abductions, because an abduction is an abduction, and to make it mandatory for governments to use it, and it should not be left at the discretionary of diplomats who have economic concerns in mind rather than human rights. So anyway, if you're going to carry on the conversation further, and I'm sorry for dropping out, I think we should really team up to try to make sure that our countries have no choice and are being held accountable for not sanctioning Japan for not respecting human rights treaties, both for international and also national abduction.
Yeah, and before you drop off on that one, is like, yeah, that's true. And I internally at Five by Parent, we've discussed about how, and I think I CC'd you on that email, right, where we can somehow put a nice group together and several countries working together and go against Japan and against our own governments for lack of effort.
Yeah. And Vincent, and all the work you've done, which is a massive, and the connections you guys have, you and the other folks over in the European Union, one of the massive failings, I think you touched on it, but I want to put a finer point on it, of the Goldman Act, and one of the biggest screw-ups we had with the Goldman Act is we took the power of enforcement from the department that had guns and deals with laws, and we put it in the hands of people whose living it is just to talk about shit and resolve nothing. And just diplomats. And so if you were to improve upon the Goldman Act, the spirit of it, please have it still rest its powers in the departments and the agencies that still have guns and have law enforcement, not in the hands of the diplomats. And thank you, Vincent.
Well, what I would like to add, especially for US, US being a big and powerful country, of course, and having Japan as the best buddy for the last 75 years, well, it was the worst enemy turned to be best buddy lately. And what I see a big problem with US government is back in the day, namely, let's talk not even that far away, 10 years or so ago, people were actually sneakily running. By people, I mean Japanese. Japanese were actively, sneakily running from the States back to Japan by getting passports in fraudulent ways, skirting the law, this and that. They were literally running from the country. Now, when it comes to Rachel's case, is one of the best examples where the judges themselves will say, oh, but you know what, the children supposed to be able to go to Japan to see their other half of the country, even though they have an immense wealth of knowledge, evidence, not just hearsay, not just, oh, I don't like the country kind of thing, but actual evidence in print, in documented one too many times, where children will go to Japan and they will disappear, and yet at the end of the day, they will stand their ground saying, well, this case might not be the case what you're trying to say, or let's hope it will not be the case, and then in the end they think, oh, if something happens, if something goes wrong, I'm a judge, I have all the power. The thing we don't realize that they have power in America. They don't have power. The moment these people leave America, their power is absolutely gone. We're just like anybody else. And maybe Rachel will be able to elaborate a little bit exactly on how the judge was more than willing to facilitate for children to go to Japan and literally get abducted.
Yeah, it would be very, albeit not extra legal, it would be very nice to have some kind of law, which has never passed, that binds, that allows judges to be held accountable for this situation, or to have it be basically put up publicly so they can be, you know, so-and-so ruled in this case, and they were provided this evidence to be warned that this would occur. And in spite of this evidence, this judge ruled this, these kids are now gone, and be some sort of redress capable, which I know is, because then everybody, it would open up Pandora's box. Everybody that ever got wrong by a judge could be suing. So, but you know, the spirit of that. But along the same lines, I would really, if we could get our act, we, and it's not putting it on us, but collective we in this boat, could find some way to hold the State Department accountable or the U.S. government accountable for all that we have been through financially in these abductions. Also, and I don't know the nature of Chris Smith's efforts, but if there could be basically the onus put in the government. You know, when I testified, I think the last two times before Congress, I put out the same idea. And that is going back, actually, I'm going to digress even further. We're talking about how to get Japan to do this. And you mentioned, Tomas, early that Japan just won't do anything. But if, I've had a relationship with Japan since 1987. And I worked there twice. I lived there twice, married to someone from there. I did business with them prior to that. So, I mean, I've had this long trajectory of life with Japan. And one thing I know absolutely about Japanese is they will not do anything unless they have no choice, i.e. they are forced to do it. And then they're very happy. They very happily acquiesce because now they're a victim. Well, I had shogunai. There's nothing that could be done. I had to do this. And I think for us to be successful, and I said this in my podcast, the U.S. government, and someone's got to goad the U.S. government to simply take the stature, albeit brutish and barbaric, to say, God damn it, you're going to do this, and this is how it's going to roll. In the first 30 days, it's between the two parties. In this next 60 days, it's between the two countries. And on the 61st day, the United States is going to deem all these children that have not been returned under bona fide court orders to be held hostage, and we will use every means at our disposal to extract these now hostage children from Japan. That's what my end game would be. That.
I agree. That's the only way. But how do we get there? How do we collectively unite? I mean, how do we go about that? I mean, and I say that because I've tried. I've really tried it, and I guess one thing that really irks me is the fact that even though we see the eye to eye in 90% of the things, there's that 10% we don't see eye to eye, and that becomes a roadblock why we can't move forward. There's so many things I don't see eye to eye with several people on certain things, and I don't make that a roadblock why I can't talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Or why I can't be part of a group collaboration. I mean, I think we learned this, at least in the United States, where we went to elementary, middle school, and high school and even college is collaboration, right?
Right.
And we may not see it eye to eye and everything, but overall we have a project and we need to finish that project. And why can't we do that for this? And this isn't a question for everybody on this.
Yeah, you're talking about various organizations or NGOs that are in this issue?
Yes, them as well.
Yeah, and I've touched on all, or been touched, or interacted with all of them, and they all do great work, and they've all had their successes. one in particular that I won't mention, I think is most concerned in the perpetuation of their connection to the government and getting called to testify constantly and never irritating anybody. That I don't think they do much. And I mean, they try, but I don't, other than getting the issue brought up, which I guess is a lot, I shouldn't be dismissive. They get the testimony and they get people before to testify, but when it comes, there are members that could do a lot to help other members that I don't think they influence enough, put pressure on enough to help them help.
When it comes to, especially to US, this political correctness of Japan is our ally, and it's a little bit nuts, to say the least, that political correctness basically will prevent from a lot of politicians speaking about this issue, because it's kind of like bashing your allies. But why does it work with Japan, where it's not, we should be quiet about Japan stealing the children, but then we will go and lecture Iran, Iraq how to do their business. Why Japan is so exempt? And another thing for US to get on top of things is simply to say, look, if you're so best buddies of ours, why you keep stealing our children? When was the last time you heard Japan crying victim that Japanese were abducted to United States of America? Like, honestly, I don't think so. I've ever heard a single instance of them crying. And Japanese, they're excellent in being victim. They're like the victim of victims. You cannot find better victims than Japanese. And yet, not a single instance so far I've heard that Japanese will go on any kind of arena and will cry, oh my goodness, our nationals are being abducted as we speak to United States. Yet on the other hand, we hear countless of times by now that American children are being abducted to Japan, and yet the State Department and whoever else, like the government at large, will do absolutely nothing and will, Japan is our ally, Japan is our buddy. What kind of buddy is that that abducts your citizen? Like, why don't we call North Korea the buddy of Japan too? If Japanese abducts Americans and your buddies, and North Korea abducted Japanese, so they must be buddies too, right? Shouldn't be, quid pro quo in that kind of sense?
Yeah, but well, I got some answers on that. One, since in my case is one of the very first Hague cases between the United States and Japan. Hague was ratified in April 2014. My kids were taken in July of 2014. So I'm one of the first few. I don't know if I'm number 3, 5, or whatever. I lose track. And so I was real aware and paying attention and super focused on this when it all happened in the beginning. And Japanese who have kids stolen, quote, abducted to the United States, they get them back because the State Department works their ass off to make sure those kids get returned to Japan. And as horrible as that sounds for us, the State Department does their side of the equation, hoping and believing diplomatically the Japanese do theirs. And what I know about Japan is that they are takers. There are three, if you want to categorize 3 kinds of people or behaviors, you have givers, takers, and matchers. Givers just give because it's the right thing to do. Matchers give because it's a quid pro quo. Takers just fucking take until you stop giving, right? Japanese are matchers and takers. They're never givers. And so we go and we lose every negotiation because we start from the noble goal of being a giver. We're going to give a little to get a little. And as I already said numerous times, that every concession is considered a weakness and a gift to Japanese. They never concede anything. Okay. And that's why we lose diplomatically, because we believe it's a two-way street. It isn't. It's their street and it's their direction they want to go. So the part where you're saying, Tomas, is that Japan is, and I know from the people I talked to in the very beginning at the State Department when they used to talk to me about stuff fairly candidly before all the gag orders went in, or whatever effective gag orders went in. And that is, Japanese get their kids back. You just don't hear about it because the Japanese take care of it privately and quietly through other channels. And I think part of the State Department's mindset is, why don't we do that? Why can't we, with abducted parents here? In essence, I've said this before privately to Enrique, and I've said it to other fathers who have been in our role too, and that is, you have a very, very, very high likelihood of success getting your children back, but certainly being in their lives if you will pay the ransom to do that. I've known fathers who've been fortunate to have had a lot of goddamn money, and they basically paid to get their kids back in their lives. And unfortunately, I'm not in that position. And so I don't get to see my kids, but I'm pretty damn sure let's say if I won the lottery and I threw a big bag of money at my wife, voila, I could see my kids. So there's not a noble bone in their body for us to appeal or think that they're like, oh, what's the best interest of the children? It's in the best interest is whatever the abducting parent deems their best interest. There's no higher thought. And so pardon the pun here, but these appeals we make are very foreign to Japanese, the mindset. So that's why we're unsuccessful. And so I want to go back to just saying we would be very successful if we did in my mind, obviously my opinion, these following things. One is we change the discussion to one where we educate the lawmakers that we need to dictate to Japan what's going to happen, not ask them. Don't ever give them a choice. Just tell them this is what's going to happen. Two, in what we do is we could use things like Google AdWords, basically, and I'll say something that maybe trigger some people, but one of the tools in social media why Trump was so effective in getting elected the first time, or when he got elected, use those tools to help us. That sort of interactive marketing kind of boom, bounce back, that type of thing, where they just built an army by just dripping out information. We could do that on Facebook and also Twitter until, of course, somebody deemed it was offensive. And I don't have any reason to believe that we wouldn't get blocked on that path at some point, because the Japanese can censor a lot of stuff. They'll just get offended and they'll censor it. But there are ways of this drip marketing that can change people's opinions that we could do on social media. And I don't know what it costs, probably costs stuff to do that, but we could just get it out there. That's how we start changing the conversation. That's how we change the mindset on Japan. Kind of like, did you know? Did you know, the age of, and I'll pick something very lightning rod and to the point. Did you know the age of consent for sex, for it not to be statutory rape, is 14 in Japan, in many parts of Japan, used to be 12. Boom. That a lot of people, when they hear that, they're like, what the fuck, huh? That's the country? That's Japan? That leads to other discussions. That's not Sanrio. That's not Mount Fuji. And did you know that, young girls are trafficked, without regard in Japan? Do you know kids are, and then you enter the thing, kids are abducted, now you've got your attention, let me now educate you, right? And so there are four, I'm going to over on here, but I want to share with you 4 tried and true methods for effective communication. Actually, for marketing, it's, marketing is communication, nothing more, nothing less, okay? And so if you want to be very effective in communicating a message like marketing, you need to get someone's attention, keep it, educate, and then provide them a low risk offer to continue. So when we put our messages out, we need to get their attention, keep it, educate them by telling them what we want them to hear, and then provide a path for a low risk, low cost, no commitment way of learning more. Trump did that in his ads. When he got elected, Parscale was excellent at that, and other things like that. And we could, with the technology you have, Enrique, and other connections we have, we could create a campaign or campaigns like that feature that kind of element, and it's super, super effective. It's tried and true. It's like communication physics, really. but a lot of people fail on it. Like one misconception is people say sex sells. No, sex interrupts. It doesn't educate, it interrupts. It gets your attention, but then it fails the test, the next thing, and that's keep your attention. So we need, a crying child gets your attention, but you got to follow it with keeping it and educating. So anyways, that's enough of my soapbox, sorry.
But I would like to add the one thing, as anybody who is involved with Japan for a long period of time, let's say longer than it takes to get acquainted with Sakura, Mount Fuji, maybe some sushi and sashimi, with green tea to the side of it. The Japanese will cry victim time and time again with whatever thing. And even though you mentioned, James, that they do have children taken to US too, but they solve it privately. However, every time you bash them, you would expect them to bring it up and say, whoa, 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 but you take Japanese children to US too, right? But we never say that. And that is something very, very puzzling. Why on this specific issue, Japan is dead quiet, like literally until you almost scream at them regarding child abduction to and within Japan. They will not even acknowledge that there's such a topic going. So that is something fascinating for me, that even to save their face, usually they will scream back at parties, oh, but you do the same, but you do the same, you do the same. On this particular point, they never do that, not one time.
Because they're excellent on the steal.
Yeah, professionals.
You're professional stealers. And one of the very first Hague cases that ever happened, and it was the State Department pointed to as a success, not just in success, but in the number of children that went back, was between two Japanese people, Manabe. And the Manabe case, she got her kids back from Japan, from the father, and she was escorted or accompanied, I'll use accompanied, by two FBI agents, U.S. FBI agents, to her habeas corpus ruling case, or habeas corpus trial in Japan. And they got their 4 kids and brought them back with 2 U.S. FBI agents in accompanying them. Okay. You bring that up to the State Department, they of course say, we deny that, we can't comment on it, it's a fucking fact. They won't talk about it. Why don't we get FBI agents? Because I asked them straight up, and they said, well, we can't do that. Bullshit, I know you did. And they can't comment on that. And so they I don't know how they do it, they being Japanese, find ways of getting shit done. And I don't know how it is, okay? But they do.
Yeah. It's just the thing is they know that we have, I think what it boils down to is that, I'll use this example. They know that in the United States there's certain laws. There's 2 things. There's laws, and they know that the government here will follow the law. Whatever it is written down, they'll go about it, and they legally we are obliged to do it.
Sure.
And they know that in Japan there is no law. I mean, I'm very simple case. A CEO will steal money in Japan, but if he's Japanese, all he has to go, and he's going to be charged for treason, corruption, money laundering, yada yada yada. The list is like as long as the sequence of a DNA. However, all he has to go do is sit on a podium, say, listen, guys, I know what I did was wrong. I truly apologize for my actions, and therefore I've decided I need to step down.
The big gomenasai.
And I'm really sorry. And that's it. All charges disappear.
Yeah.
And this is what we call in Japan like kisha kaiken, or like press conference for the wider audience. And these people will come, they will do a proper bow about like 90 degrees preferably, um, and should last about no less than 30 seconds. And if you can do 90 degrees for about like in excess of 30 seconds, you're gonna be absolved of any and all crimes you committed. However, if you happen to be a foreigner, no bending will help you, unfortunately. Not in this country. If you happen to be a foreigner, they will throw the book of the law so hard at you that you will not remember from which side to, to which side to duck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was. I have a guy that used to work for me. That was in the Navy, retired, and he used to refer to. And so they would go and do war games over in the Pacific and with Japan, and they used to joke quasi cynically joke with the people that went on shore leave that stay out of these areas, don't even look crosswise at the police over there. And he was telling me the story, and I laughed. I said, "Why?" He goes, "Oh," he says, "because they have the Tokyo phone book confession." And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "They'll take you into the room and beat you about the head with the Tokyo phone book until you admit to what they're charging you with." And oh, okay. So,
Yep, sounds about right. And that's the difference, right? And over here, if Toyota does something wrong, like their airbag, gas pedal, mat, whatever, it's $1 billion fine, right? And there's no way around it. They'll go ahead and pay it, and they know that, and they just want to get it
Mhm.
get out of it as quickly as possible, because again, Japan never does any wrong, right? And they've invested, the companies with the help of the government have invested billions of dollars a year to make sure that Japan does nothing wrong. They're just absolutely perfect, and that's what they want to shed through to all the world, right?
What I remembered also, Tomas, in my own particular case, the one that went to the Japanese Supreme Court, in beyond the judge's opinion, there actually was one of the judges that had his own separate opinion afterwards or comment in my case. And what he thought it was so important that he had to say on the record that he thinks the Hague is a stupid idea and very limiting, in that we shouldn't have such universal language, all-encompassing universal language, and that each one of these should be decided in a case-by-case situational basis.
Well, to tell you interesting fact, just a couple of days ago, there was a discussion on Japanese TV, and that's what we call Single Mothers Forum. Basically, a NGO which helps all the single mothers who steal the children. The speaker of that NGO came and said exactly the same. We said, well, we shouldn't have joint custody so universal. We should decide on case by case basis, because every case is unique. But when you listen to the people who got involved, unfortunately, in this matter, the only uniqueness about us is number of children, the date of abductions, and the difference in their names. The facts are more or less the same. And mainly, the fact is that, let's say, let's bring like 100 nations will have one and the same problem with one nation. So that is something not that very unique and not case by case basis. That is like happening daily. It's a given. It's like sun is gonna come up every morning, and that's that. And yet these people will speak every single time, will speak like, no, we cannot put joint custody in place because it will give access to domestic violence people, to the family. And either usually the mother will run from the domestic violence, and of course the father now will be legally able to go and harass the other side into visitation and this and that. But they never think and we never talk about the children's rights. We always remember the parents, the adults' rights, but the children's rights, it's never been a question. Like a simple thing as the child having a right to a parent is not even debatable. And in most cases, why it's not even debatable, because they don't treat a child as a little human. They treat a child as a little, not just a little belonging, straightforward possession. And therefore,
Yeah.
the last time I checked, belongings and possessions did not have any kind of rights because they're just things. So this
Yeah.
is
Dogs don't have rights.
yeah. So this is one of those things which happens, in Japan, like way too often. And again, political correctness stops it from people coming and saying, no, this is bullshit. Okay, the domestic violence. Okay, so parents don't get along with each other. Yeah, let them deal. What has the kid or kids to do with it? Nothing. For the kid, if mother and father sleeps in the same bed in different rooms in different cities, it doesn't make the difference that the one is a father, another is a mother. It doesn't change a fact, none one little bit about it. And yet in Japan, they will be like, no, the moment you stop sleeping in the same bed, it's no good for children to be around because they're gonna have some sort of bad influence. But then like I would be brazen enough and ask him, "Oh, really? Is that the case? Why America, 350 million people, sorry, 320 million people doing all right? Europe as a whole, 550 million people, we're doing just fine. We don't have these problems, or where people sleep and how they sleep and what happens to children. Only one special nation, Japan, inbred to the neck, so much so that the best scientists probably cannot deal with their DNA no more. And they will come and say, oh, we're so special that, the moment you start to disagree, the moment spouses start to disagree uh, amongst themselves, the children should be cut off because it's for the betterment of children. That's kind of strange. And we're living in 2021, by the way, not in the Stone Age. So it shouldn't be rocket science.
Thank you everyone for those answers. I know I only asked one question, but it was awesome to listen to you guys, go back and forth with each other and answer each other's questions. Now, this is the end of the first part of a 2-part series. We will release the next episode within the next few days. Don't miss that. Now, I would like to remind everyone that our goal here is to share knowledge with you guys and show that you're not alone in this. With that said, if you need specific legal advice, please get your own independent advice from a qualified legal practitioner. If you're a minor or if you happen to have difficulties in understanding certain parts within this episode, please approach a responsible adult or someone knowledgeable in these topics and ask them for clarifications. We have done our best to make sure that it doesn't offend anyone. And if you have further questions or comments or feedback regarding Find My Parent or this interview, you can always email me at sk@findmyparent.org. If you're someone who got separated from your own parent and would like to find your parent again, please go to findmyparent.org and fill out your details. With the help of our smart algorithms and matching technology, we hope to help you find your alienated parent again. If you're part of an NGO or even a private company passionate about this topic, please reach out through the contact us page in findmyparent.org. And we hope to work together with you. All right, folks, that's it for this week. Speak to you next week. Take care till then.
You can be just like me. You're double.